Snow fell like funeral lace over Ashcombe Manor, blotting the Yorkshire moors in white silence. Inside the oak-panelled library, Sir Geoffrey Ashcombe lay slumped across his desk, a crystal tumbler shattered beside his rigid hand. The fire had died to embers. Frost spiderwebbed the windows. No footprints marred the virgin snow outside, yet the door was locked from within. A single purple bloom, monkshood, lay crushed beneath his signet ring. Chapter 1. The House That Swallowed Screams. Snow fell upon Ashcombe Manor as though the heavens themselves sought to bury it. The Yorkshire moors stretched beyond the frost-laced windows in an unbroken shroud of white, swallowing sound, swallowing secrets. No carriage tracks marred the drive, no lantern glowed upon the moorland road. The manor stood alone, a Gothic sentinel of blackened stone and gargoyled eaves, its chimneys exhaling pale ghosts into the iron night. Inside the library, Sir Geoffrey Ashcombe lay dead. He had been a man of iron will and iron health until this evening. Now he sprawled across his mahogany desk like a discarded marionette, one rigid hand still clutching a crystal tumbler that had shattered against the turkey rug. Whiskey soaked the blotter, mingling with a darker stain that spread beneath his cheek. His eyes, once the cold blue of winter steel, stared sightlessly at the coffered ceiling, pupils contracted to pinpricks. A single bloom of monkshood, its petals the violet of fresh bruises, lay crushed beneath the heavy gold signet ring on his right hand. The fire in the Adam grate had burned low, embers pulsing like a dying heart. Frost spider-webbed the tall mullioned windows from within, though the storm had raged outside for hours. The door to the corridor stood bolted from the inside. The French doors to the terrace were locked, their keys still in the escutcheon. No footprints disturbed the virgin snow beyond the glass, yet the Persian runner bore damp smudges, as though someone had tracked in melting snow. From where? Wind rattles the panes. A log shifts in the grate with a soft thud. It was the butler, Grimshaw, who had discovered the body at dawn. He was a man carved from the same dark oak as the manor's panelling. Tall, gaunt, his face a map of crevices earned over 50 years of service. His voice, when he spoke, emerged as a rasp, as though his throat were lined with dust. Sir Geoffrey dismissed the staff at 10 o'clock, sir. Said he wished to work undisturbed on estate matters. I locked the baize door myself. The storm began at midnight. I heard the shutters battering. When I brought his morning tea at 7, the library door was still bolted. I used my passkey. Grimshaw's skeletal fingers trembled as he indicated the bolt, high on the doorframe, its brass gleaming. No one could have reached it from outside without a ladder, and the snow beneath the windows is untouched. Hercule Poirot, standing just within the threshold, absorbed these details with the precision of a watchmaker. He was a small man, impeccably dressed despite the arduous journey by sleigh from the railway station. A fur-collared overcoat, patent leather shoes polished to a mirror, and a Homburg hat now held beneath one arm. His moustaches, magnificent, symmetrical, curled with the satisfaction of a cat who has spotted cream. His eyes, green as absinthe and twice as sharp, flicked across the room like searchlights. "Curious," he murmured in his precise accented English. "Most curious. A locked room, a bolted door, a storm, and a flower that should not bloom in winter." He stepped forward, careful not to disturb the damp marks on the rug. Kneeling beside the body, he inhaled once, delicately. The scent of whiskey was strong, but beneath it lurked something acrid, metallic, aconite, wolf's bane, a poison swift and merciless, distilled from the roots of the monkshood flower. Death within minutes. Poirot lifted the crushed bloom with a silk handkerchief. Its stem had been snapped cleanly, as though plucked in haste. He noted the signet ring, Ashcombe's crest, a raven clutching a sprig of yew, and the faint indentation where the flower had been pressed against the metal. "Tell me, Monsieur Grimshaw," Poirot said without looking up, "who among the household has knowledge of botany?" The butler hesitated. Sir Geoffrey himself was a keen horticulturalist. The conservatory is his pride. Orchids mostly. Miss Grey, the governess, assists with the maiden's herbal remedies, and Dr. Harrow, of course, as physician. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the family? Miss Evelyn, Sir Geoffrey's daughter, detests the conservatory, says the air is too humid. Master Reggie, Sir Geoffrey's nephew, cares only for the stables and the card table. The fire hisses as melting snow drips from Poirot's coat. The library itself was a monument to Victorian excess. Walls lined with leather-bound volumes on law, botany, and the occult. A globe the size of a carriage wheel. A tiger-skin rug complete with snarling head. Above the mantel, a portrait of Sir Geoffrey in his prime glared down. Hawk-nosed, iron-jawed, the very image of aristocratic entitlement. Beside it hung a smaller frame. A woman in Edwardian dress, her eyes soft, her mouth sad. Lady Ashcombe, dead these 20 years. Poirot's gaze lingered on the French doors. The key was old, heavy iron. He tried it, turned smoothly. Beyond, the terrace lay buried under drifts 3 feet deep. No scuffs, no depressions. Yet the damp prints on the rug began at the doors and led directly to the desk, then vanished. He scraped a sample of the moisture with a silver fruit knife. Ice crystals still forming. The prints were fresh, made within the hour. But Grimshaw had been with him since entering the room. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. "The house, she breathes." Of footsteps approaching, measured, deliberate. A door creaks open. Elsewhere in the manor, Grimshaw led Poirot through corridors, where gas lamps hissed and shadows leapt like guilty consciences. Portraits of long-dead Ashcombes followed them with painted eyes. A judge in scarlet robes, a general with mutton-chop whiskers. A debutante clutching a fan of peacock feathers. The air smelled of beeswax, old paper, and something metallic. Blood, perhaps, or merely the storm's ozone. They emerged into the great hall, a cavern of blackened beams and minstrel galleries. A fire roared in the cavernous hearth, yet the warmth barely reached the centre of the room. 4 figures waited like pieces on a chessboard, arranged around a tea table that had gone cold. Evelyn Ashcombe stood by the windows. A flame-haired woman in her mid-20s, dressed in mourning black that did not suit her. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but dry now, her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. She was beautiful in the way of storm clouds, dangerous, electric. Reginald Reggie Ashcombe, her cousin, lounged in a winged armchair, a crystal tumbler of brandy trembling in his grip. He was perhaps 30, handsome in a dissipated way, his evening clothes rumpled, his collar askew. The scent of whiskey clung to him like a second skin. Dr. Felix Harrow stood apart, near the fireplace, polishing his spectacles with a monogrammed handkerchief. He was tall, thin, with the stooped shoulders of a scholar and the restless fingers of an addict. His cuffs bore faint yellow stains, nicotine, or perhaps something more sinister. Miss Lavinia Gray, the governess, sat primly on a velvet settee, her hands folded in her lap, a rosary of ebony beads clicking softly between her fingers. She was small, pale, dressed in dove-grey wool, her hair drawn back so severely it seemed to pull her features taut. Her eyes, when they met Poirot's, were the colour of winter rain. The silence stretched taut as a garrote. Evelyn spoke first, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. You're the detective. The one Father telegraphed for. You're too late. Poirot inclined his head. Mademoiselle, I am never too late. Merely punctual for the truth. Reggie gave a bark of laughter that held no humour. Truth? Uncle Geoffrey was poisoned in a locked room. There's your truth. He drained his glass and reached for the decanter. Dr. Harrow replaced his spectacles, the lenses flashing in the firelight. I examined the body. Cyanosis, pinpoint pupils, the odour of bitter almonds, though that's misleading with aconite. Death instantaneous, no struggle. Lavinia's rosary clicked faster. He heard voices in the walls last night, said the house was cursed. I begged him to let me sit with him, but he locked the door. Poirot's gaze swept the room, cataloguing details. The scuffed snow on the parquet near the staircase, more damp prints leading upward, the faint scent of monkshood lingering on Dr. Harrow's handkerchief. The tremor in Reggie's left hand that was not from cold. The way Evelyn's morning dress was buttoned wrong, as though donned in haste. Tell me, Poirot said softly, about the will. Evelyn's chin lifted. Father rewrote it 3 days ago, disinherited me for refusing to end my engagement to a poet he deemed unsuitable. The estate goes to Reggie, unless he dies without issue, then to a charity for retired cavalry horses. Reggie snorted. Charity! The old bastard knew I'd gamble it away. He owed me £50,000. Debts of honour said he'd see me in hell first. Dr. Harrow cleared his throat. Sir Geoffrey consulted me about chest pains. I prescribed digitalis. Monkshood was not in my dispensary. Lavinia whispered, The conservatory. He kept monkshood there. Said it deterred rats. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And who, pray, had access to this conservatory after 10 o'clock? Grimshaw stepped forward. Only Sir Geoffrey. He kept the key on his watch chain. Poirot glanced at the body, still in the library, under a sheet. Then we must examine this chain. Of a woman's scream, high, terrified, echoing from the east wing. Footsteps pound on stone. The chandelier trembles, crystals chiming like breaking ice. Poirot spun toward the sound. The house! She's not finished speaking! The scream came again, closer now, laced with desperation. Evelyn started toward the corridor, but Poirot raised a hand. No, we go together. Monsieur Grimshaw, your passkey. Inspector Japp will join us. He arrives by sleigh within the hour. Until then, no one leaves this room. Reggie laughed a hollow sound. Leave? In this storm? We're prisoners. Poirot's smile was thin as a scalpel. Precisely, monsieur. Prisoners and suspects. The scream dissolves into sobbing. Wind howls like a living thing. The fire flares, casting shadows that dance like accusing fingers. As they moved toward the east wing, Poirot noted the damp prints on the grand staircase, small, delicate, leading upward into darkness. They were fresh, melting at the edges. Someone had come down from the upper floors very recently. The sobbing grew louder, coming from the old nursery, a room locked since the death of Evelyn's sister Clara 20 years ago. The door stood ajar, a sliver of candlelight spilling onto the runner. Poirot pushed it open. The nursery was a shrine to grief. Dust sheets over furniture, a rocking horse frozen mid-gallop, a doll's house with its roof askew. In the centre of the room, on a child's chair, sat a gramophone. Its horn was cracked, its record still spinning. A little girl's voice emerged, tinny and faint. Ring a roses, a pocket full of posies. Papa, don't leave me, Evelyn gasped. Clara's voice. She recorded it the week before she died. The needle scratched to silence. On the floor, Fresh monkshood petals formed a perfect circle around the gramophone. Poirot knelt, touching one petal. Still, cold, plucked within the hour. A child's laughter echoes, impossible, chilling. The candle gutters from the corridor behind them, Grimshaw's voice strained. "Sir, the library window, it's open, snow's blowing in." Poirot rose swiftly. The killer returns to the scene. Vite! They ran. The library door stood wide, snow swirling across the threshold. The sheet had been pulled from Sir Geoffrey's body. His watch chain lay severed on the desk, the conservatory key missing. And in the centre of the turkey rug, new footprints, small, bare, a child's, led from the French doors to the body, then vanished into thin air. Chapter 2. Footprints that Vanish. The library had become a stage, and the storm its only audience. Snow swirled through the open French doors in frantic spirals, erasing the edges of the world. The child's footprints, small, perfect, impossible, ended abruptly at Sir Geoffrey's corpse, as though the floor itself had inhaled them. Hercule Poirot stood motionless in the centre of the chaos, his green eyes reflecting the blizzard, like twin emeralds caught in torchlight. His overcoat was dusted white. Melting snow traced rivulets down his patent shoes. He did not blink. "Close the doors," he ordered softly. Grimshaw obeyed, wrestling the heavy oak against the wind. The latch clicked like a judge's gavel. Instantly, the room felt smaller, airless, conspiratorial. The fire, revived by a housemaid's trembling hands, cast long shadows that writhed across the tiger-skin rug. Poirot knelt beside the footprints. They were delicate, no longer than 4 inches, the toes splayed as a child's might when running barefoot. Yet the impressions were deep, deeper than a child's weight should allow. He pressed a gloved finger into one. The snow within was already melting, forming a perfect miniature pool. "Made within the last 10 minutes, he murmured, "and yet the terrace remains untouched." He rose and approached the French doors. The key was still in the lock, but the brass was scratched, fresh gouges as though forced by a tool. Beyond the glass, the snow on the terrace lay in drifts sculpted by wind into frozen waves. No depression, no scuff, no sign that any living soul had crossed it since nightfall. Inspector Japp burst in at that moment, shaking snow from his bowler like a wet terrier. His cheeks were ruddy, his moustache iced. "Poirot!" The sleigh near overturned twice. "What the devil's this about a locked room and ghost children?" Poirot did not turn. "Observe, mon ami. Footprints that begin at a sealed door and end at a corpse. Snow that enters, but does not leave." Japp squinted at the trail. "Someone carried the child in, then out again?" "No. The prints are unidirectional. They arrive, they do not depart." The fire crackles. A log collapses with a shower of sparks. Poirot produced a silver tape measure from his pocket and laid it along the prints. 3 feet, 2 inches from door to desk. The stride is short, running, but observe the depth. The heel sinks fully 1/2 inch. A child of perhaps 4 stone could not press so. He scraped snow from the deepest print into a crystal dish. Beneath, a single violet petal, monk's hood, frozen stiff. Japp whistled. "Same as the one under the body." "Identical, but this one is fresh, plucked tonight." Grimshaw, hovering by the door, cleared his throat. "The conservatory, sir. Sir Geoffrey kept a hothouse of monkshood. Said the colour reminded him of his wife's eyes." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Take me there, at once." Of footsteps retreating. Doors open and close. The temperature rises, humid, fragrant. Glass panes rattle overhead. The conservatory was a cathedral of glass and iron, appended to the manor's east wing like a crystal blister. Even in winter it breathed heat. Pipes clanked softly, radiating warmth from the boiler below. Orchids spilled from hanging baskets in cascades of white and gold. Ferns unfurled like green fountains. In the centre, a marble fountain trickled, its basin choked with fallen petals. Poirot's breath fogged in the sudden humidity. He moved between the tables with the reverence of a priest in a reliquary. Here, the air was thick with life, loam, nectar, the faint rot of overripe fruit. He stopped at a workbench stained with soil. A pair of secateurs lay open, their blades crusted purple. Beside them, a glass retort, still warm, containing a viscous amber liquid. "Aconitine," Poirot said, lifting the retort to the light. "Distilled, enough to kill a regiment." Japp sniffed. "Smells like bitter almonds." "Precisely, the pure alkaloid. Sir Geoffrey's whisky would mask the taste." On the floor beneath the bench, a child's galoche, size 2, lined with lambskin. Snow still clung to its sole. Poirot turned it over. Inside, scratched in childish letters, C.A. Clara Ashcombe. Water drips from a leaking pipe. Plink, plink, plink. Footsteps approached. Rapid, agitated. Evelyn Ashcombe appeared in the doorway, her black dress clinging damply to her legs. Her hair had come unpinned, curling wildly about her face. "I heard voices," she gasped. "In the nursery again. Clara's lullaby, but slower, like a dirge." Poirot's eyes flicked to her feet. She wore velvet slippers, sodden. Snowmelt pooled around them. "You have been walking in the snow, mademoiselle." She glanced down, startled. I went to the terrace, to see if the footprints were real. They weren't, just wind patterns." Japp grunted. "Funny, the terrace is 3 feet deep in drifts. You'd need boots." Evelyn's chin lifted. "I'm not a suspect, Inspector. My father disinherited me. Why would I kill him?" Poirot smiled thinly. "Why indeed? But let us examine motive later. For now, tell me of this poet you plan to marry." Her eyes flashed. "Julian Vale. Father called him a parasite. Said he'd squander the estate on sonnets. And where is Monsieur Vale now? London. He doesn't know I'm here." Of glass shattering elsewhere in the conservatory. A woman's sharp cry, they ran. In the orchid house, Dr. Harrow stood amid a wreckage of shattered pots. Soil spilled like blood across the tiles. He held a broken cattleya, its roots exposed, purple crystals glittering among them. "Someone's been cultivating aconite here," he said, voice shaking. "In the orchid compost. Ingenious. The heat accelerates growth." Poirot knelt. The crystals were identical to those in the retort. He scraped a sample into a vial. "And the galoche?" Japp demanded. Harrow paled. "I found it in the nursery this morning. Thought it a prank." Poirot rose slowly. "A prank that leaves footprints in a locked room? Non, this is calculation." A low rumble, thunder, or the boiler? They returned to the library. The footprints had melted into dark stains, but Poirot had photographed them with a pocket Kodak. He now examined the French doors more closely. The scratches on the key were not from a tool, but from a nail. A woman's nail, broken and jagged. He turned to Evelyn. "Your manicure, mademoiselle. The left index finger. It is torn." She hid her hands behind her back. "I broke it opening a window." Reggie stumbled in then, reeking of brandy, a telegram crumpled in his fist. "From my bookmaker in Leeds. Pay by dawn, or lose your knees." Uncle Geoffrey laughed when I begged for an advance. Said I'd learn responsibility in the gutter. Poirot took the telegram. The paper was damp, freshly opened. "And you, Monsieur Reggie, were where at midnight?" "Asleep. Asked the housemaid. She brought me a hot brick at 11. Japp snorted. Housemaids half blind. Could have been anyone. Lavinia Gray appeared in the doorway, silent as a wraith. Her rosary was gone. Her hands were stained green. "I was in the chapel," she whispered, "praying for Sir Geoffrey's soul. I heard footsteps, small ones, running overhead." Poirot's gaze pinned her. "The nursery is directly above the chapel. You heard a child. 20 years dead?" Chapter 3. The Will in the Wall. The library had become a mausoleum of half-truths. Blood from Dr. Harrow's grazed arm soaked the turkey rug in a dark comma beside the melted footprints. The portrait of little Clara hung askew, her painted eyes now empty sockets weeping crimson paint. The .22 revolver lay on the blotter, its barrel still warm, exhaling faint curls of monkshood-scented smoke. Hercule Poirot stood at the French doors, staring into the blizzard. The child's footprints leading to the frozen lake were already vanishing, erased by wind and fresh snow, as though they had never been. Yet the image of that pale hand pressing from beneath the ice lingered behind his eyelids like a photographic negative. "Impossible," Inspector Japp muttered, binding Harrow's wound with a strip torn from the butler's apron. "The lake's been frozen solid since Michaelmas. No one could survive beneath it." Poirot did not turn. "Survival is not required, mon ami. Only appearance." He closed the doors with deliberate care, latching them against the storm. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing inward like the sides of a coffin. Grimshaw entered bearing a silver salver. "Brandy, hot water, and a telegram sealed with black wax. For you, sir. Delivered by the postboy before the roads closed. He nearly perished in the drifts." Poirot slit the envelope with a fruit knife. The message was brief, typed on heavy stock. "Ashcombe bastard claims estate. Arrives dawn. Burn will. Solicitor." The paper trembled slightly in Poirot's gloved hand. "Forged," he said quietly. "The ink is still tacky. And the seal, see the raven's wing? It is reversed. A mirror image." Evelyn Ashcombe, who had been hovering near the fireplace, snatched the telegram. Her face drained of colour. "Julian," she whispered, "my fiancé. He warned father would do this, disinherit me for a bastard cousin I've never met." Reggie, still cuffed to a chair under Japp's watchful eye, gave a cracked laugh. "Cousin? Try half-sister. Uncle Geoffrey's indiscretions were legendary." Lavinia Gray stood in the shadows by the bookcases, her dove-grey dress blending with the dust. Her rosary was missing, her fingers worried at a loose thread. "Sir Geoffrey was not unkind," she said softly, "only afraid." Poirot's gaze flicked to her. "Afraid of what, mademoiselle?" "Of the past catching him." The fire settles with a sigh. Somewhere above, floorboards creak, slow, deliberate footsteps. Poirot moved to the mantel and lifted down the portrait of Lady Ashcombe. Her eyes, violet like monkshood, followed him. Behind the frame, the safe yawned open, its contents disturbed. The original will lay atop the paternity affidavit, but a third document was missing. A codicil, dated yesterday, witnessed by Dr. Harrow. Poirot held the will to the light. The ink of the signature was faintly blue. Synthetic modern, Sir Geoffrey had used iron gall for 50 years. "Someone substituted pages," he murmured. "But why leave the original?" Japp scratched his head. "To confuse us. No, to gloat. Of a woman screaming, raw, animal. It comes from the walls themselves." They froze. The scream rose, then fractured into sobs that seemed to seep through the panelling. Poirot pressed his ear to the oak. The sound was clearest behind the tapestry depicting the Judgment of Paris. He drew it aside. A small door, no higher than a child's shoulder, was set into the wall. Its hinges were oiled, its lock freshly scratched. Grimshaw paled. "The old priest hole. sealed since the Reformation." Poirot produced a skeleton key from his waistcoat. The lock turned with a soft click. The door swung inward on darkness. A narrow staircase spiraled downward, its steps worn hollow by centuries of secret feet. The air that breathed out was cold, damp, and carried the scent of earth and monkshood. Of dripping water, far below, a child's whisper, "Papa!" Poirot descended. The others followed, lanterns casting pools of gold that slid over stones slick with frost. The staircase ended in a chamber no larger than a confessional. In its centre, a child's coffin, lid ajar. Inside lay not bones, but orchids, hundreds of them, withered black, their roots entwined around a silver locket. The engraving, "To my sister G. Lavinia sank to her knees." Clara's coffin. "He moved her here after the fever, said the churchyard was too far." Poirot lifted the locket. Inside, a curl of auburn hair and a miniature portrait of Lady Ashcombe, painted when she was 16. On the back, scratched with a pin, "Lavinia, born 1881. Forgive me." Evelyn's voice was a thread. "Mother was 16 when she bore a child out of wedlock. Father married her to hide the shame. Lavinia, you're my aunt." Lavinia's laugh was broken glass. "You're half-aunt. Geoffrey paid for my silence with this post, then threatened to expose me when I asked for Clara's locket." Something scrapes overhead. Metal on stone. Poirot looked up. A grate in the ceiling opened into the library fireplace. Through it, they could see the room above. The desk, the body, the blood, the screams, Japp breathed. Someone's been using the priest hole to move unseen. Poirot climbed back. The grate was warm, used recently. Soot on the hearth spelled letters in a child's scrawl, "Traitor." Of the gramophone starting again, Clara's lullaby, but backwards. They returned to the library. The backwards lullaby emanated from the nursery above. Poirot led the way, lantern raised. The nursery door stood open. The gramophone spun, its record warped. The needle scratched over the label, "Clara Ashcombe, age 6, 1908. But the voice was wrong, deeper, an adult mimicking a child. On the rocking horse, a white communion dress swayed, though no wind stirred. Its hem was stained purple, monkshood juice. Poirot lifted the dress. Beneath, a hot water bottle, still lukewarm, filled with snow. A length of wire was coiled inside, cut from the chandelier in the hall. "The footprints," he said. "Snow carried in the bottle, melted to confuse timing. The dress worn over adult clothes to fake a child's stature. The wire to drop the chandelier on Reggie." Reggie, dragged along by Japp, snarled. "I told you, I didn't touch the chandelier." "No, but someone wished you dead." Of glass shattering in the conservatory. A man's shout. Harrow. They ran. The conservatory was a battlefield of shattered glass and soil. Dr. Harrow stood amid the wreckage, a shard protruding from his thigh. Blood pooled like spilled ink. "Someone locked me in," he gasped, "smashed the orchids, took the aconite crystals." Poirot knelt. The wound was shallow, staged, but the missing crystals were real. He found a trail of blood leading to the boiler room. The door was ajar. Inside, the furnace roared, its grate stuffed with burning papers. Poirot snatched a poker and raked out the flames, charred fragments, the missing codicil, naming Julian Vale as heir. And a diary, Sir Geoffrey's, its last entry dated yesterday. "Lavinia knows about the child in London. She threatens exposure. Must rewrite will tonight. God forgive me." The furnace belches smoke. A child's shadow flickers on the wall, then gone. Back in the library, Poirot gathered them like a magistrate. The killer moves through walls, leaves child's footprints, burns evidence, but one detail betrays them. He held up the hot water bottle. Inside the rubber, a monogram. E.A. Evelyn Ashcombe. Evelyn's face crumpled. I used it for cramps. Anyone could have taken it. Poirot's smile was winter. Anyone with access to your boudoir and knowledge of the priest hole. He turned to Lavinia. You tended Clara's grave in secret. You distilled aconite for suicide if exposure came. But you slept by the chapel fire last night. Your candle stub proves it. Lavinia nodded, tears falling. I woke to the gramophone, thought it a dream. Reggie strained against his cuffs. Then it was Harrow. He forged the codicil. Harrow, bandaged now, shook his head. I witnessed it, yes, but Geoffrey changed his mind at the last moment, said he'd burn it himself. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then where is the ashes? He moved to the desk. The inkwell was overturned, but the blotter beneath was dry. He lifted it. Beneath, a single camellia petal, white as bone. Chapter 4. The Nursery Spectre. The nursery door hung ajar, exhaling frost. Poirot stepped inside first, lantern raised. The air was colder here than in the blizzard outside. Unnatural, as though the room itself were a tomb. Dust lay thick as grave soil over everything. A doll's house with its roof askew, a rocking horse frozen mid-gallop, a child's cot draped in cobwebs. In the centre of the floor, the gramophone spun silently. Its brass horn cracked like a broken smile. The record label read, Clara Ashcombe, age 6, 1908. No one had wound it. Poirot lifted the needle. Scratch. A little girl's voice, tinny and faint. Papa, don't leave me. Ring-a-ring-a roses. Evelyn Ashcombe clutched the doorframe, her knuckles white. That's her, exactly as she sounded the day before the fever took her. Reggie, still cuffed, peered over Jap's shoulder. I saw her last night. White dress, eyes like holes. She drifted across the corridor and vanished through the wall. Dr. Harrow, arm in a sling, prescribed himself a shudder. Mass hysteria. The mind plays tricks in grief. Lavinia Gray entered last, her rosary clicking like hail on glass. She crossed herself before the cot. Locked this room 20 years ago. Sir Geoffrey gave me the only key. Poirot examined the lock. Fresh scratches, nail marks, frantic. The key was missing. The rocking horse creaks once, though no wind stirs. He moved to the grate. Ash and camellia petals, white as bone. He scraped them into an envelope. Beneath, a child's fingerprint in soot, small, perfect. Impossible, Jap muttered, unless the ghost has grown. Poirot's lantern swept the walls. Behind the doll's house, a panel stood ajar, another priest hole, narrower than the last. Inside, a child's galoshes, size 2, lined with lambskin. Snow still clung to the soles, melting into the floorboards. He turned them over. Inside, scratched, CA. Evelyn gasped. Clara's! I buried them with her. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Someone exhumed more than memories. Of footsteps overhead, light, running, a child's giggle chilling. They looked up. The ceiling was intact. The sound came from the attic. Poirot led the ascent. The attic door was locked, padlocked from within. Jap splintered it. Inside, trunks, moth-eaten furs, a child's cot, and Julian Vale, Evelyn's poet, bound and gagged, his face bruised. He spat the gag. They took my clothes, locked me here 3 days ago. His suit matched Reggie's. Same tailor, same brandy stains. Poirot untied him. You were the scapegoat. Someone wore your clothes to frame you. Julian's eyes found Evelyn. I came to beg Geoffrey for your hand. He laughed. Said he'd see me in Newgate first. Snow falls through a hole in the roof. A child's shadow flickers. Then gone, Poirot looked up. The hole led to the nursery chimney. A rope dangled, knotted every foot. The killer descended like a spider, he said. Wore Julian's clothes, left his telegram, burned the codicil, but one mistake. He held up Julian's boot. The sole, size 10. The galoshes, size 2. Impossible to fit. Evelyn sank to her knees. Then who? Poirot's gaze swept the room. Grimshaw stood in the doorway, his face grey. The butler, Poirot said softly. Who else could move unseen? Who knew every passage, every key? Grimshaw's hands trembled. I served this family 40 years. Sir Geoffrey promised me a pension, then cut me out for a bastard in London. He pulled a derringer. The child arrives at dawn. I'll burn the house first. Japp lunged. The gun fired into the ceiling. Plaster rained. Poirot stepped forward. You distilled the aconite in the boiler room, used the priest hole, wore Clara's dress, but you forgot one detail. He held up Grimshaw's boot. The sole, monk's hood residue. Grimshaw laughed, mad. The house told me to. Clara's voice, she whispered from the walls. Of the gramophone, Clara's lullaby, clear, from Grimshaw's pocket, Poirot withdrew a pocket phonograph, miniature clockwork. Its cylinder, Clara's voice, recorded yesterday. You played it, through the grates, Poirot said, to drive us mad. But the house did not speak. You did. Grimshaw collapsed, sobbing. He was going to give everything to a stranger. After all, I did. Dawn light filters through the attic window. Pink, innocent Poirot stood over him. The will in the wall was never the true one. Sir Geoffrey burned the codicil himself. Here, in the attic furnace, the ashes spell his final truth. The estate to Evelyn, the bastard provided for, Grimshaw pensioned. He forgave you all. He turned to the window. On the horizon, a sleigh approached, bearing the real solicitor, the real heir. The house kept its secrets, Poirot said, but the snow melts, and truth, like spring, always comes. Chapter 5. The poisoned orchid dawn bled pale light through the conservatory's cracked panes. Shards of pottery glittered like ice across the tiles. Soil spilled in dark rivers. In the centre, one orchid stood defiant, its roots dusted violet with aconite crystals. Poirot knelt, gloved fingers brushing the bloom. The killer's garden, he murmured, monk's hood cultivated among cattleyas. Heat forces, winter growth, ingenious. Japp, nursing coffee, grunted, Enough to poison the county! Behind them, Grimshaw, cuffed, broken, sat on a bench, head in hands. The pocket phonograph lay smashed beside him. Evelyn entered, wrapped in a man's dressing gown, eyes hollow. Julian's alive, but father's diary burned. Poirot rose. Fragments remain, enough. He produced the charred pages. Last entry. Lavinia's child arrives tomorrow. I will acknowledge her. Forgive me, Clara. Lavinia, rosary restored, whispered, He planned to rewrite everything for my daughter. Dr. Harrow limped in, fresh bandage on his thigh. I witnessed the codicil. Then he changed his mind, said blood must win. Reggie, uncuffed but guarded, sneered. Blood? Mine's as red as yours, Doctor. Debts don't care about bastards. Poirot's gaze swept them. 3 motives, 1 murder. Let us reconstruct. Of water dripping, steady like a clock. He moved to the workbench. The retort still held amber liquid, aconitine, pure. Beside it, a child's cup, enamel-chipped, residue purple. Clara's cup, Evelyn breathed, from the nursery. Poirot lifted it. Inside rim, lipstick, scarlet. Someone drank here, then offered Sir Geoffrey whiskey from the same vessel, masked by spirit. He turned to the shattered pots. Beneath one, a rubber hot water bottle, monogram EA snowmelt pooled inside. Your bottle, mademoiselle? Evelyn flushed. I used it for cramps. Convenient, carried snow indoors to fake footprints, melted to confuse timing. Jap. But the child's prints. Poirot produced the galoshes. Worn over adult shoes. Lambskin muffles sound. Size 2 outside, size 8 within. He fitted his own foot. Perfect. A raven lands on the broken roof. Croaks once. Poirot gathered them in the library. Sir Geoffrey's body lay sheeted. The monk's hood bloom beneath his ring, now wilted black. The killer entered via priest hole at 11:47 p.m. Poirot began. Wore Clara's dress over clothes, galoshes over boots. Carried hot water bottle of snow. Played pocket phonograph through grate. Clara's voice luring Geoffrey to conservatory. He paced. Offered whiskey laced with aconitine from child's cup. Geoffrey drank, trusting the ghost of his daughter. Death in minutes, killer locked French doors, tossed key into snow via broken pane. Returned later to plant camellias, cut chandelier wire, smear lipstick. Reggie laughed. Clever, but I was asleep. Poirot held up Reggie's bedsheet, dry. No night sweats, no footprints to East Wing. You are innocent of murder. Harrow cleared his throat. I treated Geoffrey for gout. Monk's hood eases pain, small doses. I kept crystals in my dispensary. Poirot's eyes flashed. Your dispensary key, missing since yesterday, found in the orchid soil. He produced it, soil-caked. Lavinia's rosary clicked. I distilled aconite for headaches, never poison. Poirot turned to her. Your vial, wax seal broken by teeth. Overbite matches, Dr. Harrow's. Harrow paled. I borrowed it, for research. Of glass crunching underfoot. The orchid trembles. Poirot lifted the defiant bloom. Beneath its pot, a torn railway ticket, London to York, dated 3 days ago. Someone arrived before the storm, hid in the attic, wore Julian's clothes. Julian, bandaged, entered with the solicitor. A thin woman, 30, auburn hair like Clara's. My name is Clara Vale, she said quietly. Sir Geoffrey's granddaughter. He sent for me. Evelyn stared. You're my niece? Clara nodded. He wanted to make amends. The codicil names me co-heir, with provisions for all. Poirot smiled thinly. The true will, burned by Sir Geoffrey himself, to protect you from greed. He turned to Harrow. You eavesdropped, saw the new will, feared losing your influence, your secret. Harrow's hand went to his sling. What secret? Poirot produced a letter from the diary ashes. To Dr. Harrow, Clara's fever was no accident. You gave her the wrong dose. I know. G.A. Harrow lunged for the orchid knife. Jap tackled him. 30 years, Harrow screamed. He blamed me for his wife's death in childbirth, then for Clara's. I poisoned him to silence the truth. The orchid wilts, petals falling like purple snow. Poirot stood over him. You used Lavinia's vial, Grimshaw's passages, Clara's dress, but the lipstick, scarlet, was yours, from the nurse you dismissed last month. He held up a tube, monogrammed F.H. Harrow laughed, broken. She'll corroborate nothing. I paid her to vanish. Jap cuffed him. Attempted murder of Reggie too. The chandelier wire. Reggie rubbed his throat. Why me? To frame you. Debts made you perfect. Sun breaks through. Melting snow from the glass roof. Poirot addressed the room. The poisoned orchid bloomed from guilt. Sir Geoffrey forgave. All but the one who could not forgive himself. He turned to Clara Vale. The estate is yours, mademoiselle, with Evelyn, and provisions for Lavinia, Grimshaw, even Reggie's debts. Clara smiled, tears falling. Grandfather's last gift. Outside, the snow began to melt. Footprints, real ones, led from the manor to the waiting sleigh. Chapter 6. Blood on the Snow. The conservatory lay in ruins, but the truth was finally taking root. Dr. Felix Harrow sat cuffed to a wrought-iron bench. blood from his grazed arm drying to rust on his cuff. His spectacles were cracked. Behind them, his eyes were glassy with defeat. Poirot stood over the wilted orchid, its purple-dusted roots exposed like a confession. "You cultivated death among beauty, Docteur. Aconite in the compost, distilled in the retort, served in a child's cup, but one detail escaped you." He lifted the enamel cup, Clara's, chipped and stained. On the rim, a faint crescent of tooth enamel. "Your overbite," Poirot said. "The wax seal on Lavinia's vial, broken by the same mark." Harrow laughed, a dry rattle. "Clever, monsieur, but Geoffrey deserved it. He blamed me for his wife's death, then for Clara's fever. 30 years of penance, and he still wrote that letter." Japp snapped his notebook shut. "Attempted murder of Reggie, too. The chandelier wire, your fingerprints in lampblack." Reggie, rubbing his throat, glared. "Why me, you bastard?" Harrow shrugged. "Debts made you perfect. Everyone would believe you snapped." Wind shifts. Snow cascades from the glass roof. Like a waterfall, Poirot turned to the French doors. The melted footprints had left dark scars on the rug. He knelt, scraping residue into a vial. Snow carried in the hot water bottle. Monogram EA, melted to confuse timing. But the water itself tells a story. He held the vial to the light. Mineral traces, from the boiler room tap. Only the staff use that spigot. Grimshaw, still cuffed in the corner, lifted his head. "I filled bottles for the guests. Anyone could have taken one." Poirot's gaze pinned him. "But only you knew the priest-hole routes. Only you could move unseen." Grimshaw's voice cracked. "I wanted my pension. 40 years. Poirot produced the charred diary page. "Sir Geoffrey provided for you. The true codicil, burned by his own hand, left you $500 a year. More than enough," Grimshaw wept. "Then why the ghost?" Of boots crunching snow outside. A child's voice hums Clara's lullaby. Close, real, they turned. Through the broken pane, small footprints appeared in the fresh snow, leading from the manor to the frozen lake. Japp drew his revolver. "The child! He's here!" Poirot raised a hand. "No, observe. The prints were deliberate, evenly spaced." At the lake's edge, they stopped. A child's mitten lay on the ice. Red wool, monogram CV. Clara Vale, the real heir, stepped from the sleigh outside. She was 30, auburn-haired, eyes violet like her grandmother's. She held the matching mitten. "I dropped it," she said softly. "Grandfather taught me to walk the lake path as a child, before he sent me away." Evelyn stared. "You're my niece?" Clara nodded. "He wrote every month, promised to bring me home when the time was right." Ice groans beneath the lake. Deep, ominous Poirot moved to the doors. "The footprints were made this morning, after the storm, to lure us here." He pointed to the ice. Beneath the surface, something moved, a dark shape, struggling. Japp smashed the ice with his truncheon. Water gushed. A figure surfaced. Julian Vale, the poet, bound and gagged, half frozen. Evelyn screamed. "They said you were in the attic!" Julian coughed lake water. "They moved me at dawn, said I'd drown with the secrets." Poirot hauled him out. "Who?" Julian's teeth chattered. "Two of them. One in Clara's dress, one in Grimshaw's livery." Of footsteps running, inside the manor. A door slams. Poirot spun. "The east wing, feet!" They ran. The corridor was dark, gas lamps guttering. At the nursery, the door stood open. Inside, the gramophone spun backwards. Clara's voice warped into a demon's chant. On the rocking horse, a figure in white, small, hooded, it turned, not a child. Lavinia Gray, her face painted corpse white, eyes ringed black. In her hand, the missing conservatory key. "I had to finish it," she whispered, "for my daughter." She raised a derringer, Grimshaw's. Japp lunged. The shot shattered the doll's house. Splinters rained. Poirot stepped forward. "You distilled the aconite for suicide, mademoiselle. Not murder. Harrow stole it." Lavinia's hand trembled. "He promised to expose me. Said Clara's child would take everything. I wore the dress to frighten Geoffrey, only frighten. But Harrow followed. He poured the poison. The rocking horse rocks once. Slow Poirot took the gun. You staged the lake footprints with Clara Vale's mitten, moved Julian to silence him. But the tooth mark on the vial, Harrow's, not yours." Lavinia collapsed. "I wanted her safe, that's all." Clara Vale entered, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Mother!" Lavinia looked up, broken. "I gave you away to protect you. Geoffrey paid, then welcomed you back." Sun breaks through, gilding the nursery, and Gaulle Poirot addressed them all. Harrow poisoned for revenge, Grimshaw terrified for greed, Lavinia protected for love. 3 crimes, 1 death. The snow records every step. He turned to the window. The lake steamed, footprints melting into slush. Blood on the snow washes clean, but guilt, it stains forever. Japp led Harrow and Grimshaw away. Lavinia embraced Clara, sobbing. Evelyn stood alone, watching the manor's shadow shrink in the rising sun. Poirot twirled his moustache. The house exhales its ghosts, and we close the doors. Chapter 7. The Bastard's Claim. The manor exhaled. Warm air from the conservatory boilers met the thawing world outside. Icicles wept in silver streams. In the great hall, the suspects gathered like chess pieces after checkmate. Yet the board was not cleared. Hercule Poirot stood before the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back. The charred diary lay open on the mantel, its final page curled like a dying leaf. Sir Geoffrey's true codicil, he announced, named 3 heirs, Evelyn, Clara Vale, and provisions for Lavinia and Grimshaw. He burned the false will himself. Here, in this grate, the ashes spell forgiveness. Clara Vale, 30, auburn-haired, eyes violet, stood beside her mother, Lavinia. The governess's face was stripped of paint, revealing lines etched by decades of secrets. Dr. Harrow, cuffed to a chair, sneered, "Forgiveness! He accused me of murdering his child." Grimshaw, beside him, stared at the floor. "Pension or not, I terrified the house with Clara's voice. I'm damned." Reggie poured brandy with shaking hands. "And I'm ruined. Debts don't die with forgiveness." Julian Vale, wrapped in blankets, coughed. "Someone tried to drown me twice. Forgiveness feels thin." A log shifts in the grate. Sparks fly like accusations. Poirot lifted the child's mitten. Red wool, monogram CV. This was planted on the lake to lure us. But the footprints were made after the storm, by adult boots fitted with galoshes. He produced the size 2 galoshes, lambskin lined. Inside, a second insole, lifting them to adult size. "Worn over Harrow's shoes," Poirot said. "The limp from your grazed thigh, self-inflicted to explain blood." Harrow lunged against his cuffs. "Prove it!" Poirot held up the derringer, Grimshaw's, but the grip wrapped in surgical tape. "Your tape, docteur, from your dispensary, fingerprints beneath." Japp nodded. "And the chandelier wire, cut with your scalpel." Of sleigh bells outside. Closer now. The front door burst open. A solicitor entered, snow clinging to his greatcoat, a leather satchel in hand. Behind him, a boy, perhaps 12, auburn-haired, eyes wide. "Master Geoffrey Ashcombe," the solicitor announced, "Sir Geoffrey's legitimate grandson, born in Australia, summoned by letter 6 months ago." Evelyn gasped. Another heir. The boy, Geoffrey Jr., held a locket. Inside, a portrait of Lady Ashcombe and a lock of hair. Grandfather wrote me, he said softly. Said the manor needed new blood, said to bring this. Poirot took the locket. On the back, coordinates etched in tiny script. The family vault, he murmured, beneath the chapel. The boy's boots leave wet prints, small, real, they shackled. Descended, the chapel was cold, pews draped in dust. Beneath the altar, a stone slab freshly disturbed. Poirot and Japp lifted it. Inside, a metal box. Within, the true will sealed in wax dated yesterday. Poirot read aloud, "To my children, Evelyn, Clara, young Geoffrey, equal shares. To Lavinia, my sister, the dower house. To Grimshaw, $500 yearly. To Harrow, nothing. His debt is paid in silence." Harrow roared. "He knew about the fever. My mistake," Lavinia wept. "He forgave even that." Of ice-cracking, sharp, final. The Lake Poirot closed the box. The bastard's claim was never bastardy. It was legitimacy, hidden to protect the boy from scandal. He turned to young Geoffrey. "Your father was Sir Geoffrey's secret son, born before his marriage, raised abroad. The letter summoned you to claim your birthright." The boy nodded. He said the house was cursed by lies. Time to end it. Sunlight spears through the chapel window, gilding the will Poirot addressed the room. Harrow poisoned to silence accusation. Grimshaw terrified to secure his future. Lavinia protected her daughter with ghosts. But the true killer of trust was Sir Geoffrey himself, hiding his son, his sister, his guilt. He turned to Harrow. "You followed Lavinia's ghost to the conservatory, saw the aconite, seized the chance." Harrow spat. "He deserved it." Japp hauled him up. "Murder, attempted murder, forgery, you're done." Grimshaw was led away, sobbing. Lavinia embraced Clara and young Geoffrey. "Family," she whispered, "at last." Evelyn stood apart, tears freezing on her lashes. Julian took her hand. Poirot watched the sleigh depart. Harrow and Grimshaw aboard, bound for York jail. "The bastard's claim," he said softly, "was the bravest act. Sir Geoffrey died to bring his son home." Outside, the snow melted into rivulets, carving clean paths through the moor. The manor's shadow shrank. Poirot twirled his moustache. "Lies thaw faster than snow, and truth, it flows like spring." Chapter 8. The trail of blood, the true will lay open on the altar, wax seal cracked. Sir Geoffrey's spidery signature gleaming in fresh ink. The chapel smelled of damp stone and old incense. Outside, the moor steamed under a weak sun. Poirot stood with hands clasped, eyes half closed. The bastard's claim is settled. Young Geoffrey inherits with Evelyn and Clara Vale. Lavinia gets the dower house, Grimshaw his pension, yet one thread remains. He turned to Dr. Harrow, cuffed and defiant. "You poisoned Sir Geoffrey, but the blood trail leads further." Harrow's lip curled. "I've confessed, what more?" Poirot lifted the child's mitten. Red wool, CV. This was found on the lake, but the footprints beneath it were made after dawn, by boots size 9, not a child's. Japp frowned. "We pulled Julian from the ice. He's half dead." Poirot's gaze moved to the vault. "Someone wanted us to find the will after the murder. Someone who knew its hiding place." A floorboard creaks behind the altar. They spun, a shadow detached from the confessional. Reggie Ashcombe, brandy flask in one hand, a blood-stained handkerchief in the other. "Looking for me," he rasped. His left sleeve was soaked crimson. Evelyn gasped. "Your throat! The chandelier!" Reggie laughed hollow. "Staged. Wire cut. Crystal shard in my arm. Had to sell the panic." Poirot stepped forward. "You shot at Harrow in the library, grazed him to frame him further, then vanished." Reggie's eyes flicked to the will. Uncle promised me 50,000, then rewrote everything for bastards and poets. I needed the money. Bookmakers don't wait. Of sleigh bells outside, returning Jap drew his revolver. Hands up, lad. Reggie raised the flask instead, to the end of the Ashcombs. He drank deeply, then staggered, clutching his throat. Poison. He collapsed, foam at his lips, aconite, fast. Poirot knelt, checking the pulse. Dead, self-administered, the final betrayal. In Reggie's pocket, a second vial, Lavinia's, half empty. Lavinia wept. He stole it from my room. Said he'd frame me if I spoke. The candle flares, then steadies Poirot rose. Reggie forged the telegram, planted the mitten, cut the chandelier to fake his own injury. He intended to drown Julian, silence the poet who knew too much. Julian, supported by Clara Vale, nodded weakly. He cornered me in the attic, said I'd ruin Evelyn's inheritance, tied me, moved me to the lake at gunpoint. Evelyn's voice broke. You were going to let me think you were dead. Reggie's eyes, glazing, found hers. Love, or money, chose wrong. Of boots on stone, young Geoffrey entering with the solicitor. The boy knelt by Reggie. Cousin, why? Reggie's hand twitched toward the will. To keep it ours. Poirot closed the dead man's eyes. He trailed blood to lead us here, knowing he'd die, a confession without trial. He turned to the vault. Beneath the will, a second document, a letter in Reggie's hand. If I fail, burn this. I poisoned nothing. Harrow did. I only scared them. Debts made me mad. Forgive me, Evie. Evelyn read it, tears falling. He was protecting me, in his way. Sunlight floods the chapel. Gilding the altar, Poirot addressed the survivors. Harrow killed for vengeance. Grimshaw terrified for greed. Reggie died for love twisted by desperation. The trail of blood ends in regret. He folded the letter into the will. The estate divides as Sir Geoffrey wished. Young Geoffrey, Evelyn, Clara Vale, co-heirs. Lavinia, the dower house. Julian, your poems may yet save the manor. Clara smiled through tears. Grandfather's last gift. Outside, the snow was gone. Muddy paths led from the manor to the moor, clean, open. Poirot twirled his moustache. Blood washes away, but the stain of choices, it lingers. Let this be the final trail. Chapter 9. The Conservatory Reconstruction. The conservatory had been swept clean of shards and soil, but the air still carried the scent of crushed monkshood and betrayal. Afternoon sun slanted through the repaired roof, gilding the workbench where death had been distilled. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, a conductor before his orchestra of suspects. Around him, Evelyn, Julian, Clara Vale, young Geoffrey, Lavinia, Jap, and the solicitor. Harrow and Grimshaw waited in cuffs at the door. Reggie's body lay sheeted in the chapel. Poirot raised a gloved hand. We reconstruct the crime, precisely. The little grey cells demand order. He began to pace. Friday, 11:42 p.m. Sir Geoffrey dismisses staff, locks himself in the library to rewrite his will, but he is not alone. Of a pocket phonograph, Clara's lullaby, faint from the great Grimshaw, seeking his pension, plays the recording through the priest-hole grate. Sir Geoffrey, startled, believes it his dead daughter. He unlocks the French doors, steps into the conservatory seeking her. Grimshaw hung his head. I only wanted to frighten him into keeping his promise. Poirot nodded. You succeed. He enters here. He moved to the workbench. Harrow, hidden among the orchids, waits. He has stolen Lavinia's aconite vial, distilled it pure. He wears Clara's communion dress over his clothes, found in the nursery trunk. Harrow sneered. He blamed me for 30 years. I gave him silence. A drop of water falls from a leaf. Plink Poirot lifted the enamel child's cup. Harrow offers whisky from this, laced with aconitine. Sir Geoffrey, seeing Clara, drinks trustingly. Death in 90 seconds. He demonstrated cup to lips, swallow, stagger. Harrow locks the French doors from inside, tosses the key through the broken pane into snow. He carries a hot water bottle of snow. Evelyn's pours it to fake footprints, melts to confuse timing. Evelyn flushed. I thought it stolen for cramps. Poirot continued. He returns via priest hole, plants camellia petals, cuts chandelier wire with scalpel, smears scarlet lipstick, his dismissed nurses, all to suggest a woman's rage. Japp grunted. And the child's footprints? Poirot produced the galoshes, size 2 outside, adult insole within, worn over Harrow's boots, lambskin muffle sound. He plants them from terrace to desk, then vanishes. Of ice cracking outside, the lake fully thawed, Poirot turned to Reggie's sheeted corner. Reggie, awake, here's the gramophone. He enters the nursery, finds the dress missing, the galoshes gone. He suspects framing, cuts his arm with crystal to fake injury, shoots at Harrow to expose him, grazes instead. Julian spoke hoarsely. Reggie confronted me in the attic, said he'd drown me to protect Evelyn's share, tied me, moved me to the lake at dawn. Poirot nodded. Reggie plants the mitten, makes adult footprints in galoshes to mimic the ghost, intends suicide by aconite if caught. His final note proves it. He held up the letter from Reggie's pocket. I scared them. Harrow killed. Forgive me, Evie. Evelyn wept silently. Sunlight shifts. Shadows retreat. Poirot faced Lavinia. You distilled aconite for suicide. If exposure came, Harrow stole it. You wore the dress once, to frighten Geoffrey into rewriting for Clara Vale, but you slept by the chapel fire. Lavinia nodded. I woke to the shot, thought it a dream. Poirot turned to young Geoffrey. Your arrival was the catalyst. Sir Geoffrey planned to reveal you, his legitimate grandson from Australia. Harrow feared the new will would expose his past mistake with Clara's fever. The boy held the locket. Grandfather wrote, Bring the truth home. The orchid drops its last petal. Poirot addressed all. Harrow murdered for vengeance. Grimshaw terrified for greed. Reggie died for misguided love. Lavinia protected her child. Sir Geoffrey died to unite his fractured family. He placed the true will on the workbench. The estate divides. Evelyn, Clara Vale, young Geoffrey, equal. Lavinia, the dower house. Grimshaw, pension. Julian, your poems will fund repairs. Japp cuffed Harrow tighter. And you, York Jail. Life, Harrow spat. He got what he deserved. Poirot's eyes flashed. No, he got what he gave. Forgiveness. You received justice. Outside, the moor lay brown and open. The manor's windows gleamed, free of frost. Poirot twirled his moustache. The conservatory reconstructs the crime, but spring, it reconstructs life. Chapter 10. The Order of Betrayal. Sunlight poured through the glass cathedral of the conservatory, gilding every face. The workbench had become a courtroom. The true will lay open, the enamel child's cup beside it like evidence. Poirot stood at the head, small but immovable, the conductor of a symphony finely resolved. He spoke without notes, voice crisp as frost. Order, mes amis, the order of betrayal. He lifted one finger. Dr. Felix Harrow, motive, vengeance. For 30 years he carried guilt, the wrong dose that killed little Clara in fever, the childbirth that took Lady Ashcombe. Sir Geoffrey's letter threatened exposure. Harrow stole Lavinia's aconite, distilled it here, wore Clara's dress, lured Geoffrey with the gramophone, poisoned him with whiskey in the child's cup. He staged footprints, camellias, lipstick, chandelier, red herrings to point at women. Harrow, cuffed, stared at the floor. He should have died blaming himself. Poirot raised a second finger. Grimshaw. Motive. Greed. 40 years of service. Promised pension cut for the bastard heirs. He played Clara's voice through priest-hole grates to terrify Geoffrey into reinstating him. Unwittingly gave Harrow his opening. Grimshaw wept silently. I only wanted what was mine. Third finger, Reggie Ashcombe. Motive, love twisted by debt. Bookmakers at his throat, he forged the telegram, planted the mitten, cut his arm to fake injury, shot at Harrow to expose him, intended to drown Julian to protect Evelyn's share. When cornered, took his own life with the remaining aconite. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. Julian held her steady. Fourth finger, Lavinia Gray. Motive, protection. Geoffrey's illegitimate sister, Clara Vale's secret mother. She distilled aconite for suicide if exposed. Wore the dress once to frighten him into providing for her daughter. Slept through the murder. Lavinia clutched Clara's hand. I failed you both. Poirot lowered his hand. Sir Geoffrey himself was the fifth betrayal. Hiding his sister, his Australian son, his guilt, he died to end the lies. Poirot turned to the heirs. Young Geoffrey, legitimate grandson, summoned from Australia. Evelyn, disinherited then restored. Clara Vale, illegitimate but acknowledged. The estate divides equally. Lavinia, the dower house. Grimshaw, 500 thalers yearly. Julian, your poems will fund the roofs. The solicitor notarized the will with a flourish. Japp hauled Harrow up. Murder, attempted murder, forgery, life. Grimshaw was led away for accessory. Poirot addressed the survivors. The order is complete. Betrayal flows like meltwater, downward, inevitable, but truth, it rises. Evelyn stepped forward, eyes clear. Father's last gift was family, not gold. Young Geoffrey placed the locket on the workbench. Inside, Lady Ashcombe, Sir Geoffrey, and a new photograph, Clara Vale as a child. Clara smiled through tears. He kept us all. Lavinia touched the enamel cup. Clara's voice, real this time. The gramophone in the nursery began to spin on its own. No one had wound it. Clara's lullaby, clear, sweet, 6 years old. Ring-a-ring-a roses. Papa, come home. They froze. Poirot closed his eyes. Some mysteries even I cannot solve. He opened them, smiled thinly. But this one ends. He placed the child's galoshes atop the will. The footprints stop here. Outside, the moor steamed. Muddy paths led from the manor in every direction. Open, free. The sleigh waited to take Harrow and Grimshaw to York. Poirot stepped into the light. The heirs followed, arm in arm. Evelyn and Julian, Clara and young Geoffrey, Lavinia between them. The manor's shadow was gone. Poirot twirled his moustache one last time. The little grey cells rest. The house is silent, and the snow, la neige, has melted into spring.